Hey everyone, happy Friday! Great week this week, lots of announcements. This is a big one. Just have a lot of things to cover, so I would recommend listening and reading as always, maybe even listening twice because things are moving fast, and so I want to make sure that everybody adopts all of these protocol changes or clarifications as possible. So here we go. This week, one of the highlights that we had was that Alex hosted our first customer care specialist Sprout School. And the focus was Atlantis. And so she took the first two team members aside and focused on Atlantis, specifically with entering medications and activities, and then other elements of the software as well. But those were the highlights because I wanted everybody to remember, and I said this a couple weeks ago, so I have to keep reminding everyone that at the resort, nothing happens if it's not on a list. So any extra special care, any checking and confirming of anything that needs to happen, those things go on a list and they get added through an activities list, like medications or playtimes or anything else like that. Bandage checking, check e-collar, monitor in this particular way. All those types of instructions get added there. And those instructions can either come from clients, from other team members, from doctors at the hospital, those types of things. So that's where we would add those to make sure that they're done. Unfortunately, just writing it on a pet's contract is not quite enough because paperwork in a boarding kennel is tough. So we want to make sure that we use those lists for those things. And I'm really, really excited that Sprout School's got the ball rolling just to get everybody on board. The next great level of that is that we will be able to offer this to other team members. We are going to require this as a skill or certification from level 2 and level 3 employees from all departments. And so as soon as Alex finishes working through the customer care team on confirming and certifying this skill, we're going to open it up to others. So I would be on the lookout soon for a confirmation of that, or an invitation to join a meeting schedule for those types of things. After we have finished these prioritized team members who we have to have doing this, we'll open it up to level 1 team members who want to go ahead and get this skill underway. And again, this will be a certification or a skill that we'll be able to renew. It's going to be listed in your humanity profile, so you'll get credit for that too, okay? Really, really excited. Thanks, Alex, for putting a great program together and for everybody who's helped make that happen. The next thing that I wanted to go over is after some trial and review from our new doctor's schedule, we've decided to expand our morning block off for transferring cases on Saturdays and Sundays. Last week I told you it was 30 minutes from 7 to 7:30 a.m. Now I'd like to expand it to being an hour. We're just having enough hospitalized cases that 30 minutes is not completely sufficient to do that in the way that we need to. So we want to extend that block off from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. for the incoming doctor. So how this would look would be the incoming doctor on a Saturday or Sunday morning who's working a 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. will receive transferred hospitalized cases, make point of contact with the pet owner, make a new plan, renew those on whiteboard, examine that pet. The whole works goes into that hour. Because they're receiving all those pets. Now that doctor who's leaving, who would have worked either 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. or 4 p.m. the night before to 8 a.m. will be available to see appointments still up until 8 a.m. So that 7 to 8 a.m. spot is still available for appointments, just with the outgoing doctor instead of the incoming doctor. Let me know if you have any questions about that, but we want to make that effective immediately. So my person who does those things on the schedule is Lindsay Chasson. She's going to make that happen, so you'll see that right away. The next thing that I wanted to review as an AHA standard is when prescribed medications are administered in the hospital, either as maybe the only dose or as a first dose, we have to make sure that we note this in the plan section of the SOAP of the medical condition, okay? So in the plan notes area, we have to note that we administered a dose and who administered it. So this is how it would look as an example. I've put it in the text too. So if we were in an exam room and I was administering a medication to a patient, I would note in the plan section, administered 25 milligrams of Daramax orally, and I would put my name, Allison Habits, no initials, first and last name. It's important. It's part of the medical record. You guys always list if you gave an injection, but we just have to start putting a name with if we gave something. So with an injection, with a medication, you make sure that you note if you've given a first dose or an only dose at that point. Also, if we have something that gets a single dose, like maybe a dewormer, or maybe we're just giving one dose of an antibiotic for whatever reason, maybe a pain medication just for that day. If you give that, you not only will note that in the plan section too, but you would have a drug label. We want to make sure that anything that we give in hospitals also reflected on the drug label. So for those only dose things, there really doesn't need to be a drug label because you're not sending anything home. You delete the drug label, and on the notes of that item, you would say administered in exam room, and again put your name. I've got a lot of clarification for you and examples of how that exactly looks in the text, but the whole idea is on the drug label and in the plan section you would state where, when, and who administered the medication for the first time or for the only time. And if there's not a need for a drug label, you make it a note on that particular item as well as in the plan section. And use your whole name, not just your initials. Okay, the next thing that I want to go over was employee pet care. This is something that we're really proud to offer and we've got great discounts for, and nothing's changing with that. However, despite giving a discount, I want everybody to know as far as you as the pet parent, and then as far as you as also for other people, the pet caregiver, that we equivalate employee pet care to any other patient care. These are all patients of ours. And so in the light of record keeping and liability, all those things are all the same. So for employees who are bringing their pets, you still have to have your pet's record kept. You still have to sign consent forms, etc. For team who are caring for other teams' pets as patients here, all those things have to be done. You keep that pet's record exactly the same. All notations are made in the appropriate areas and are thoroughly completed on the same time schedule. These pets are not under-prioritized in any way. Consent forms are signed as appropriate. You get emergency phone numbers still. Pet monitoring forms are done appropriately and completed in all fields. Identification bands are still put on pets. All these things happen, no exceptions at all. This is not only for the integrity of our process, but it's also for our liability because we're still responsible for every patient just the same. And I certainly don't want to disappoint an employee over caring for their pet either. So just make sure that those things are done. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was a challenge that was brought up specifically by our customer care team recently, but it's been an ongoing problem. We've had a trend of canceled appointments, and a lot of these appointments are made in advance from the exam rooms, and I have a suspicion of what's happening is that these appointments are made in the exam rooms and that those appointment cards are not being placed specifically in a client's hand. I think that they're maybe being tucked in a bag, or maybe an appointment card is not being made, but the appointment was made. So we have to do better. We cannot afford to have these appointments canceling. I don't want these patients missing out on care. I don't want our practice missing out on the opportunity to care. I don't want gaps in our schedule. I don't want frustrated clients who end up with overdue pets. None of those things are good, and none were anybody's intention. But you have to know that we're falling short somewhere in the process. So here's how it should look instead. If you're a nurse in the exam room making an appointment for a client to return with their pet for their next service, you would make an appointment reminder card. The back of our business card, you write the appointment down. You guys know how to do this. You place it directly in the client's hand. You tell them when the appointment is and what it's for, and set some expectations around that. Those things happen generally, I want to believe. However, if the client is not present, whoever is responsible for receiving the pet from you, you have to hand that off. We essentially will discharge pets to one another. if you're going to go and you're going to put that pet back in a kennel in the hospital area, you have to make sure that that pet has a bag to go home that goes in its cage valet, and that appointment card is in there. And then the responsibility shifts to the person who reunites the pet with their owner, be that another nurse or a customer care team member or a resort team member. You are responsible for going through that pet's belongings, finding that card, and then taking on the role of the person who made the appointment, which is place that appointment card in their hand, review what it's for, and set some expectations around that appointment. So you might say, hey, this looks like Marley has an appointment coming up. In 6 months, she'll be due to receive her Bordetella vaccine and her CIV vaccine, that's the canine influenza. Your appointment is Tuesday at 3 o'clock with our nurse. If you have any questions, give us a call. If this doesn't work, we can rearrange this now with the customer care team, or we're going to call you before your appointment, text you, let you know, so you have time when it gets closer to that date to rearrange to something that makes a little bit more sense for you. Pretty simple. Nothing extra special. It's just the act of doing it. Had that card been left in the bag, this is what I think is happening. Those clients then fall to the review system, and they never knew that that appointment existed, and we're frustrating them when we call them to say, hey, you've got this appointment coming up, and it just adds a lot of pressure. Maybe it embarrasses them. They feel like they weren't on top of their schedule. They can't make it. It's really hard for our customer care team to recover from a point of frustration when that's where you started. So we have to do better. In short, I'll summarize this by saying, if you make an appointment, it's your responsibility to make sure that that card gets in the right area. And if you reunite a pet with the owner, it's your responsibility to make sure that that card makes it into their hand and they understand what they're leaving with. So this is a whole team problem. This is not a customer care problem. This is not a nurse's problem. This is not a resort problem. This is everybody's problem. So we have to do better. What I recommend is that if a pet has a lot of belongings, that you make sure that you go through them ahead of time. And if they have a lot of belongings and a card, bring those things up to the client first before you bring the pet and say, here's your belongings. Let's go put these in your car. Here's your appointment. Go through the appointment expectations and time and confirm all of those things just as I showed you, and then go get the pet and reunite them. I just want to emphasize that this is really important because people take their schedules very seriously and they take our care very seriously, and when those things don't come together, it's a failure on both parts. So we have to do better. Let me know if you have any questions, and I do expect your supervisors, your assistant managers to work through this with you and do some role playing just to make sure that we've nailed it, because it's causing a bit of a problem right now. The next thing I wanted to share is that this week Jamie created a Google sign-up sheet for the customer care team that reviews holiday hours and shifts that are available for the customer care team, and it allows them to sign up for those shifts. I wanted everybody to know about this because it's going to be with our Google Sheets, like our task lists and things, so that you can glance at it at any time. I really love that by specific holiday, it breaks down what those hours will be, so that you can know when to expect a customer care team in our lobby on a holiday versus not. In the past holidays, it's been variable as we've been kind of figuring out how those were going to go. Also, she's made some little cheat sheets similar to these that will go on the side of the phones and computers, so that you would know when you could guide a client to having access to a team member in the lobby. That would be most important for if we have a holiday where we want to know if they're going to be able to check in and out of the resort, for example, or if we want to know if we're going to be able to offer them to come in for over-the-counter sales types of things like heartworm prevention, refills, that kind of thing on a holiday, when it's going to be the most convenient for a client because we have a customer care team member in the lobby. So I just wanted everybody to know that thing exists. The next big announcement that I have is, considering that we're ending summer and we're moving into traditionally what's been our slower season, I felt comfortable with being able to play with our schedule a little bit more. Also with having an increased medical staff, more doctors, more nurses, new shifts, I felt that it was appropriate timing to go ahead and remove the restrictions on the schedule for vaccinations. So far, over the past couple of years, we've restricted the number of vaccine appointments that a doctor can see in one shift for themselves. We put the guide between 4 and 6, capped it at 6, but I feel like we can remove that restriction completely now and say that it's unlimited. However, I will share this. Some important things when you're creating a schedule is to consider the flow of our hospital. When I say unlimited, it doesn't mean that you can put a doctor who works 8 to 4 seeing nothing but wellnesses in that day. That would not make for a good schedule. The flow would be challenging that day. Instead, I'm saying that our customer care team and our nurses who do make scheduled appointments for doctors should keep in mind that we want to leave some openings in the maybe late morning and then again in the mid-afternoon, so that these doctors don't get overwhelmed with wellnesses and can still work in patients who prefer to see them for sick patient appointments, rechecks, referrals, those types of things. Again, we want to leave some availability for them. And then also you can encourage wellnesses at all times of the day. We take appointments 24/7. So there's plenty of room to spread these out. I will end with this topic with saying also that a wellness is not an emergency. So just because somebody calls today to say that they want to schedule their pet for a wellness vaccine appointment or a booster appointment or anything like that, a recheck, that those things are not urgent. So if the schedule's already looking full of those, you can offer a different day. It would be okay to say, how's Monday or Tuesday for you? How's this day or this day? And then wait for them to ask for if you have something sooner, and you can say, well, actually I do. But just be aware of those things and understand that everyone is individually responsible for making sure that our days flow well. So don't overload a shift. Be responsible, in other words. The next thing that I wanted to share is I feel like there's been some confusion about witness heartworm tests, and it seems everybody's confused. So I want to make this really, really simple for you, because it is a simple concept that I think got lost somewhere. So the simplest answer is that when you would use a witness heartworm test if a pet was switching products but was not yet due for a routine heartworm test. So if you have somebody who wants to change from Sentinel to ProHeart and they're not due for their heartworm test for another 4 months but want to make the change now, you could go ahead and do a witness heartworm test today. And if it's negative, you administer the heartworm prevention. And then they would fall back to the schedule of routine heartworm testing, maybe when it lines up with their annual or when they're due, and they will pay for that heartworm test when they are next due. You would not use a witness heartworm test if you have a pet who's maybe missed prevention, or if they were regularly due for a heartworm test, like on an annual basis, a heartworm test following heartworm treatment, confirmation heartworm testing. In these situations, a witness test is not appropriate, but what is appropriate is the screening fee, the heartworm testing fee that we've always used for each of those appropriate situations. So again, nothing's changed with the way that we test for heartworms. Nothing's changed with how frequently or with the actual fee that we use. We are just allowing, since we have changed as a practice our primary heartworm prevention from Sentinel to ProHeart, that if people want to make the change now, we're going to offer them a free heartworm test, and then the next heartworm test that they get will fall in line with when they were actually next due, and that one will be paid. So I've written that in the text with all the examples of when to and when not to use those witness tests. Make sure that we review that, because we're expecting everybody to be on board immediately. The next thing that I want to go with, or that I want to go through is we've got to do better as a hospital team. The resort does great with this. The hospital does not do great with this, with putting our ID bands on hospitalized patients, dogs and cats. This is somewhere where there is no wiggle room 100% of the time, unless you have a vicious pet or a highly aggressive pet, in which case I get the owner to put them on. No wiggle room. These pets all have to have those collars on 100% of the time. You know all the reasons that we want to do this, so there's no reason not to do this. If anybody can come up with a reason not to put one on that I haven't already given you an out for, bring it to me. I want to be proven wrong. But until then, every pet needs to have one on. So make sure that we are at 100% compliance immediately with this. Don't get bit. Don't put yourself in a situation. But if you look to the owner and you say, hey, do you think you can put this collar on them? And tell them all the reasons that you want them to, they will do it. It's important. We got to get better. The next thing that I wanted to go through is we have added a protocol for post-anesthetic patient monitoring, and we've actually added an area on our anesthetic monitoring form to do this. We want all of our nurses to start taking post-op vitals on patients 20 minutes after they have been taken off of ISO during recovery, and then again 2 hours after. So I've added this. I'm going to attach it. I'm going to scan this in so you can see the highlighted area. It won't be highlighted on your form, but it's an area that we want to give attention to. So what we're asking you to do is take a temperature and heart rate on these patients, again 20 minutes after anesthesia, and then again 2 hours after anesthesia. There is also an initial blank so that you can initial that it's done. It's an important part of record keeping, and it's an important part of patient care and patient safety with anesthesia. I never want anybody to forget that the most risky time of anesthesia is during recovery, and I feel like sometimes we can become a little complacent with some of the risks of anesthesia, like low temperature, low heart rate, not recovering right. The busier that we get, the more worried I get. So I just want to make sure that we've added this. This is also an AAHA standard, a suggested standard, but a standard. So I want to make sure that we're doing that. Again, I'll attach this so everybody can see. I'll leave this hard copy with the procedure nurses area near those computers so that you can get familiar with it and don't forget. But we want this to be effective Monday, the 13th. This is when this is due. So make sure you've done that. Okay, that's our update for this week. I will want to end with this, just a weekly reminder, a send-off, just about our team and about our practice. We have a lot of new team members, and things are going great, but you're learning our culture, you're learning what our practice is about. So here is a message for you, and then for everybody, no matter how long you've worked here. We want to know what you don't know. We are a practice that celebrates that. Knowing what you don't know helps us to reduce risk, expedite results, and it opens doors for you to learn. Ignorance is important to communicate about. If you tell a doctor what you don't know, they will teach you, and they will not expect it from you until they have taught you. If you tell a manager what you don't know, they will make it their point so that you can learn, and they will protect you from being put into a situation where those things were expected from you unfairly. It's important for you to communicate what you don't know. Don't be embarrassed about it. Don't be ashamed of it. Just share it. Otherwise, you may be assumed to know that and then held accountable for it. And I don't want anyone to end up in that position. As big as we've gotten and as busy as we've gotten, I don't want to forget the individual, and I don't want to forget the impact that everybody is able to make. One of my favorite things about our practice is that we actually celebrate ignorance, but only for a moment before we eradicate it with knowledge. So make sure that you share what you don't know so that we can make you better and we can make this practice better for it. It's a safe thing. It's a risk controller, and again, it just opens so many doors for you. So tell me what you don't know. Tell everybody what you don't know so that we can help you to know it. Okay, great. Have a great weekend. Keep up the great work. You guys are amazing. We love you. Don't forget to read this training. There's a lot of fine details in here. Click on finish with you when you're done. Remember, the due date is Monday. Take care.